So I'm going to move now into just a broad overview of definitions here. Okay. So in your in your handbook, there's a chapter in there called definitions, and you'll see this chart, and you'll see a lot more elaborate detail in there. But this is, when you're in person with me in this workshop, this is a 4 foot by about 8 feet tall chart. And I use it to push this information and present this. And the main thing I want you to see first off is this interactivity gauge here down through the middle here. And on the one side, there's the left side, it's a push of information. So there's low interactivity. You've already got something pre-designed or structured in some way, and you're using the visual artifact to push that information to your group. And then on the far side, we've got, and that push, by the way, is not a lot of pull, it's push, so there's not a lot of interactivity from the group. When you move to the other side of the spectrum, we've got the higher interactivity, and that's where you're pulling. And this is where I find the work very exciting, especially for process professionals, right? Because we're pulling information. We're setting a space and container for the people that we're working with, and we're doing something with them, and we're eliciting information from them, and they're thinking, and they're making decisions, et cetera, right? We're drawing that out from them, literally. And so this is high interactivity, this is high pull. And depending on how you do the middle here, you can get a little bit of both with push and pull in here. So the 4 ways of working as I cut the cards, they fall into this interactivity spectrum. And the first one that we have is studio work. So that's over here on the far left. You can see it's a small one on the screen, but you can see it larger in your handbook. There's a little drawing here of a process professional, and she's sitting there at her desk. And this could be after she's worked with a group, or it could be before she works with the group. But she's constructing stuff in the quiet of her studio. She's probably been working back and forth, like I said, with the client. She may never have met them actually in person. She could be designing stuff with them by speaking with them or working with them over the internet or something. And she's creating pre-prepared stuff that's probably going to be used in the room, or it might be, we're seeing this more, and I think one of you mentioned this in your introductions. We're seeing more stuff that's being, Mark, you, integrated into, say, their websites, their intranets, different kinds of, maybe even material with their client base or something, your clients, their client base. So there's a fine line in here between illustrative work, which is a different animal, but it's showing up in our clients. They are coming to us to ask for that kind of stuff. And some people build, especially those of you who are graphic designers and illustrators and artists, right? Some practitioners build their practices just around this studio work market. Others of us, myself included, right? I don't resonate with that work as strongly. I don't have that illustrator design background, so it actually makes me a little anxious to have to do a large studio project because of the perfectionism of it. So I play more on the other side of the spectrum. I will do studio work, but it's more manageable stuff that I'm going to use in my own forums as opposed to something that's, you know, really on the high end of the illustrative side of the market. So examples of stuff that can get done, lots of things, but history maps. So maybe a history of an organization. Maybe they're having a big event or something, and they want to show where they've been and who they are as a company. Obviously, agenda maps. If you're doing some sort of forum, you can create the agenda as a kickoff for whoever's kicking off that event. Different kinds of visioning, inspirational, aspirational things. Mark, I know that you do your work, right, with the cartooning of people's inspirational selves and really mirroring and reflecting that back to them. So those are just a few of them, lots of different things. I'll show you examples, a few examples later today. And then when we actually get into this part of the agenda, I'll go through the portfolio and show you lots of different ones, and you control the internet and see them. But sometimes when talking about trolling the internet, some people don't understand the apples and the oranges, and they're thinking that things are the same when they're not. So they might be comparing somebody's studio work to somebody else's live facilitation work. Not fair. Done under totally different circumstances. So this one, like we said, this gal's sitting there in the privacy of her studio, right? She's got quiet. She's not having to facilitate and do process and juggle a million things at once. She's zeroing in and she's creating that artifact. That's much different than when we move across the spectrum here into the other genres where you're actually doing live work as opposed to being there in the sanctity of your studio. So let's do that. Let's move along the chart. So I've given you a taste of this studio work. And by the way, I have to keep updating things. I used to call it custom chart work, but now I've changed to calling it studio work, primarily because of these videos. You're seeing the whiteboard explainer videos that have become all the rage the last couple of years. It's certainly impacted the interest in this work, right? And brought visibility to the field, et cetera. But in my opinion, you know, that's studio work. That's really designed work that is very constructed, and it's done under certain circumstances. So the video stuff falls in here too. Okay, now we move into visual recording. This could graphic recording, scribing, not sketchnoting. For those of you in sketchnoting, sketchnoting doesn't really fall in here because sketchnoting is kind of like your own personal studio work, right? Because nobody else is really seeing it. So visual recording, this is where other people are going to be seeing those notes. Whether you're doing them like the picture here, the recorder is up there at the wall with large sheets of paper. Again, you could be doing it in a tablet and it's being projected. But normally there's a separation here. If you look at how I've drawn this graphic, there's the group, and I've actually got a facilitator, somebody managing the process of that group. And then there's that scribe off on the side doing their best to synthesize what's going on. So that's visual recording, is where you're separate, you're off on the side. And hold on, I'm just going to mute folks who are coming on here. Okay. And this is best done. This is where the confusion in the field happens quite a lot, is this dividing line between the recording and the facilitation or the true process work. So if you're wanting to do, or you're a client who's bringing in someone to do this, this should be high level, pretty general information, or that person who's recording ideally has a specialty in that kind of information, so maybe they can track with a little more complexity than the average person can. But it's got to be something that people can sift off to the side without being able to speak much and have much interaction with the group. For more complex content, you've got to default to facilitation, or if you're working with an individual, you know, coaching therapy work, as opposed to this recording. It's just not fair. It's not fair to expect a recorder to get that level of detail with being a mute scribe off on the side. To get that more detailed stuff, look at the picture here in visual facilitation. We've got the U shape, so the group is being opened and involved in the graphics, and this is co-built. So literally, as people are speaking, the recorder or the facilitation team are getting down what they're saying up on the wall as it's being said, and people are responding to it and helping build it as they go. That's how you get much more detailed, complex information, like strategic planning, visioning, maybe even hardcore resolution, mediation kind of work, right? That much more detailed stuff. That's how you get that this is where I see a lot of problems, and I'm coaching, you know, new recorders and stuff coming up, and how to contract with their client, how to educate first off, and then contract with their clients, because clients aren't necessarily going to have a lot of understanding about this stuff either. So they may be seeing somebody else's work, they want it for themselves, they don't understand the conditions under which it needs to be done, right? So often there's a lot of education and boundary work that needs to happen for us professionals to make sure when we do go live that we're capable of doing what their expectations are. And, you know, as you go along and you have bump up into a couple of those tough situations, you learn pretty quick about how to contract up front better. So the expectations are clear and that you're doing the role that you should be doing, given that nature of that context and that process that's going on. And then the final one, by the way, with facilitation work or any process work, you can end up having teams. I'm what's called a true visual facilitator. So when I go into a room, I'm doing both. I'm the lead process facilitator who's designed it all with the client ahead of time. And then I go in and I'm scribing, doing the scribing at the same time as I'm holding the space and doing all the facilitation stuff. You can work in teams. It's a delight when you can. So one person, or you can share the role being the facilitator and another or several being the scribe. Scribing is very intense work. And sometimes in our community, we'll compare ourselves to language translators. Language translators work in teams, and they work, I think it's 15, 20 minutes or something, on, off, right? That's kind of how it should be with our work, too, when you're in the scribing role, because it's super intense focus that's required. And it's nice to be able to work in teams, to be able to pair that way. And also for somebody to be holding that bigger process container, right, without having to actually do the scribing at the same time. It can be done. I'm here to say it can be done. I've been told that other people don't understand this work very well, and other instructors will say it cannot be done. That's ridiculous. I come from the Grove Consultants where David Civet really pioneered this work. Yes, you're probably going to be using templates or different aids to help you do it, but it absolutely can be done where one person is holding the process and scribing at the same time. It's going to look different than a graphic recording or studio work. It's going to be much more functional, i.e. messy, less pictures. Back to Louise, your point about words, but that's graphics, that's visual facilitation with one person doing it, right? You got to get your expectations right about what is humanly possible for one person to do. And it's still helpful. That's why we go in with lots of different aids with maybe the drawing done so that we can just focus and get the words down when that's happening live. We can always take that stuff if it's rough, right? From a visual perspective, we take it back to the studio, we can take it up to the next level from there. And then the fourth one is, it's the same as the facilitation work with groups, it's just with one person. Or it might be a partnership or a team or a couple. I work a lot with entrepreneurial couples, love doing that. I do strategic planning, visioning, and inner work around the resistance and stuff. So it's more intimate, right? The people that you're working with, oftentimes it's about a personal aspect to the work. So with my visual coach certification program, I'm attracting people who are coaches and also a lot of therapists and counselors, which has been really wonderful, right? Because they have a different container that ethically they can hold in places that they can go that coaches can't go. So this work is really wonderful for that really deep, intimate, personal work as much as it is for the corporate, businessy, you know, different emotional, more surface emotional stuff. So fantastic range of what we can apply to stuff. So that's a quick overview and down and dirty about the 4 different ways of working as I see them: studio work, visual recording, visual facilitation, and visual coaching. Okay. Now, I know I've got a couple of questions here. It looks like, Helen, you've got it. So I'm going to unmute. Let's see. Let me go back and take a look. Yeah, I'm going to talk about, Helen, about the apps and programs for the iPad. If you haven't already, I would direct you to the bonus video. It's already up there on the class resources page. Rachel Smith does a whole hour on this and is very gracious about getting into the exact apps and programs. Okay, and I can talk to you about that in the Q&A session as well. Okay, good. So with our remaining time, let me just flash a couple of examples, just set this in. Okay, so again, the studio work, including those explainer videos. We've got, I just did, I was kind of cobbler's kid syndrome there for a while. I didn't have my own explainer video, and I worked with one of my students, Sarah Moyle, who's really great at them. And so we've got an explainer video now. You can check out the YouTube channel for an example. And they're all over, particularly the RS Animate videos, if you know what those are. Just some quick things. You can see these in more detail. They're in your handbook. I would also remind you that the handbook's black and white, but we've got a color portfolio on your class resources page that has all this stuff in color so you can see it. But here's an example of a custom studio piece. This is an agenda chart for one of my classes. I used to call this class Meeting Graphics 101 back in the day. So here's an example. This is called an ORS chart. So I've got the outcomes, the agenda, the roles, and the rules. That's just a classic pre-prepared chart that you can do for events, right? Doing a visual agenda. The Grove Consultants, if you're familiar with them, that's another bonus video. I've interviewed Lori Durnell. I used to work with the Grove in San Francisco years ago, and was there helping them build their product line for the graphic guides. They have several graphic guides that are templates that you can use to do the same thing, right? Doing a visual agenda. Another quick example of a custom chart. There's so many different things I could show you, and I will in much more depth when we move further on in the program and have our different sessions that relate to these specific topics. But these next 2 slides, here's this is a visual bio. These are really fun to do, especially this is for our workshop leader. So a good friend of mine now, this is the woman I learned a lot about copywriting, right? So copy being the words on your website, right? Marketing copy. Lori Morgan Ferrero, she's Red Hot Copy down in Los Angeles. And this is a chart that we did for her speed copywriting workshop. And it's a 2-parter, so I'll just flash over it here. At the end, you can see that's her standing in that workshop, right? But we used this chart to set the scene at that workshop at the beginning about how the heck she came to be standing in that room and her journey, her red hot journey with learning to be the copywriting guru that she is. So really setting the evidence base. So for some of you in this group who are trainers or workshop leads or doing something, you know, where you're holding your own container, it might be appropriate for you to do a visual bio. These are great to put on your website, right, on your About page. You can video yourself standing there telling the story, touching the chart. You can do an overlay with Camtasia or something where you could just be going over the chart, right, and have a visual or an audio overlay to it. Lots of different things you can do with these things. Okay, those are just quick things to, you know, look at the nature of this stuff, right? I mean, this is built, this is not spontaneous work. These kinds of charts, this Red Hot Journey chart probably took about 3 days or so, right? As I'm working back and forth content with her, everything's approved in terms of what's the imagery, what are the words, right? So it takes some time to get this stuff constructed and then to literally make the big one, right? This is 16 feet, so 4 feet by 16 feet in its original form. Okay, I'm going to flash next to visual recording. This is a recording of a woman, Wendy Friesen, who's a hypnotherapist guru, and it's a summary of her talk on creativity and her work. Recording is really great for keynote speeches, panel interviews, right? Something where somebody's delivering. They might be standing up there at the room delivering on a PowerPoint, and the scribe will be off on the side doing a visual summary. Here's another one. This is Gary Hoover. This is going back a while, but he's talking about his book ideas. And if you're doing kind of higher level brainstorming stuff, that can be done. This is kind of getting close into facilitation, but it's high enough level that it can be done under the recording conditions. So this is Gordon Betty Moore Foundation, philanthropists, and they were just creating their foundation back then, and they were looking back over their first year and their accomplishments. So this is a recording as that group is reflecting on their accomplishments over the last year. I'm off on the side recording those into little nuggets, into little blips there as each person's talking, and I'm getting those accomplishments recorded down. So this stuff, as you look at it, right, I mean, this is the most constructed is where you're in the studio work, because you've got lots of time in the quiet of your studio. Now we're starting to move live. But it's under recording situations, so you're not responsible for holding the process container, right? So that's easier. Stuff's going to look a little better because you're not having to juggle so many balls. Now, when we move into facilitation, we're juggling more balls, right? We're holding the process container and dealing with all the dynamics and stuff. So it's challenging, right? I feel like I've got a set of eyes and ears on my back, because I'm always constantly moving. If I'm at the wall writing something, I actually have learned over time to write sideways as opposed to, you know, my back totally to the clients. And I'm moving a lot, making sure that I've got eye contact and I'm, you know, holding proper space. So it's an interesting dance that happens between you at the wall when you're creating your this is a template of the Groves, again, from their strategic planning suite of tools, strategic visioning. This is a history map. So underneath here is actually a template. I'd like to show this one to get you thinking that you don't just have to be the one, or your graphic recorder that you're working with doesn't have to be the only one using a pen. There's a lot of things that you can do to involve the people in your groups. And so we used cutouts. You can see these construction paper cutouts as a mingling exercise at the beginning before we got going to get people thinking about these different categories of information. You can see it here along the left, right? Who are the champions and innovators? What are their different projects and initiatives, key events, breakthroughs, lessons, learnings, big changes, key products. We're working with 100 people in this room, and it's the home and appliance equipment industry, right? So all sorts of vendors and producers in this industry. And we're looking over 100 years plus. So we go back to like the 1900s. So this is a big picture view of their past as we move into doing some strategic planning about their future with them. So we involve them. They write their ideas on those construction paper bits. They post them up in the appropriate place. And then we go to the beginning and we start telling the story, and then we're recording their insights and their ahs up here in blue as we move along. So counter this, right, with how this stuff looks, with how the studio work or the recording looks. It's a different animal, and it's done under different conditions. Totally okay, normal. From the Grove, their context map. I'll talk more about templates and stuff when we have our graphic facilitation module, and we actually do our own template designing, because there are some things in the market. Grove's one of them. I've got a suite for visual coaching. I've got my shifted templates. There's different people who are doing different template sets in different genre areas. But if something doesn't exist, then you can create your own, right, for the specific needs of what's going on in your group. Excellent tools. So again, if we take a look at this, there's the black line is already pre-drawn. Those shapes and those cluster areas are already pre-done. We're just getting the content down. Decent writing, separation lines, bullets. We've got one graphic kind of thrown in there, the globe in there. But this is graphic, this is visual. And you'll see when you watch the videos, the graphic facilitation videos, if you haven't seen graphic facilitation, true graphic facilitation in action, very interactive, very co-built, very fun, very engaging, thorough way of working with a group. Because they're co-building this. Their eyeballs, they're all front and center building this stuff with you. You're not off on the side doing your own take on stuff. And I throw this one in too because it's not highly great. It's very basic. But this chart is actually worth its weight in gold because this is the end product after a whole day of visioning, right? And we've done all sorts of sticky note processes, and we've got down to this. And the stuff in the center here with the red around it, that's going to be taken up into a studio piece later. But this is worth its weight in gold, and this is really good graphic facilitation work. So I just want to reassure you facilitators out there, if your stuff is looking like this, that's okay. That's what my stuff looks like when I'm doing hardcore thinking with a group, right? I can make it pretty and take it up to the next level later, or if I've got the luxury of having a graphic recorder with me, they can be adding stuff to it as we're moving along. And then finally, we've got another 5 minutes here. Let me just cover the visual coaching stuff to give you a flash of that. I talked about professional kind of visual bios earlier. You can also do history maps, very intricate history maps and stuff of companies. I love working with individuals and drawing out their life histories. And that's what ShiftIt's all about. We have a move in there, harvest your history. And so Anne's allowed me to show this. Anne's a visual practitioner. And here's I've actually done this one over the phone with her. She's in Missouri or something, and I'm in British Columbia. I'm hooked up with my headset. And I actually I like to do the history maps live, or large, sorry, as opposed to on the tablet. Because I've got 16 foot of space to work with. I like that movement. And I will take photos of it, send it to my client, right? We'll work back and forth that way. And then send them the scans and stuff afterwards. And you can also, if you're lucky enough to have your client there in person, it's a super powerful thing for them to sit there with 16 feet of paper, blank paper in front of them, and you, over a couple hours, draw out their life map in front of them. Super powerful. Beautiful work. And ahas for the clients. This is an example of one of my templates in the ShiftIt process called Essential Extracts. It's a vision boarding exercise. So my client, I like to get people rolling up their sleeves and doing the visual stuff themselves to different extents. And this is collage work with magazines, and then extracting out the essence of his vision from there. Another example of a interaction, a client building it. In the middle is another tool from ShiftIt called the magnetism map. It's a visioning tool to help a person get really clear about what they next want, and also where their resistance lies. Rashmi, you were talking about that, right? I have a little test on there to see whether they can allow and believe that for themselves. And this particular client has also combined his magnetism map with imagery and, you know, sprinkle it all around. So to really flesh that out and really make that vision alive for him. So, you know, in a short period of time here, in a short hour, I'm able to show you a landscape of how this work is used, right? And great range. If you think about, you know, you might have IT consulting on one side or accounting work or something in a corporation. all the way down to heavy-duty visioning and life mapping for individuals and everything in between. That's what I love about it, is the range. And it's nice, you know, I love being a process professional because I know this is something I will do. I don't really intend on retiring. As long as my mind and body are active, I think process work is so great because you just get better and better with it with age, right? And with experience and seasoning. And thankfully with the visual stuff, you can take that into wherever you end up morphing on your path. I have morphed from being a recorder to being a corporate facilitator, and then I've morphed into being an educator and trainer, and now, you know, really deep process work. And I'm always have a future self in front of me about what I'm next interested in, and I know that my skills and the visuals, I'll be using them my whole life. The process work I'm doing and the people I'm working with may radically change, but those base underlying skills can be applied to all those things that I'm interested in over the course of my life and over the course of my career as a process professional. So for me, I just, you know, I adore them. Those skills, they're so flexible, and they're once you got them, and you can roll them into whoever you next are. I think a great thing.